Okay, good morning. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, this is a series of pictures of Georgia, Armenia, and Turkey. And my late wife Edith and I went in 2008. It was a seminar I was supposed to go to in Armenia involving youth voluntary service, which was kind of a job. I mean, I wasn't working by then, I was retired. So we were going to Armenia. So we decided to go via Turkey and Georgia. So we flew to Istanbul and stayed overnight with a friend who works for the voluntary service organization in Turkey, and flew the next morning early to to Batumi in Georgia, which is on the Black Sea. And from there, we aimed to get to Gori, the birthplace of Stalin. We're not fans of Stalin especially, but we thought it was an interesting place because Stalin was still, his memorial and everything was there. So from the airport in Batumi, there seemed to be no means of getting there except squeezing ourselves into some minibus with a load of other people who were going to Tbilisi. And we got in this crowded minibus all the way to Gori, which is where the series of pictures begins. But I think we'll start with a map to show you roughly the journey. On the outward, we flew from Istanbul to Batumi and then minibus to Gori in Georgia. Many of you know more about Georgia than I do from the talk you heard, I think, a few weeks ago. We only went to Gori and Tbilisi, the two cities. Your speaker on that occasion had been all over the country, so I think you had a bigger picture of the whole country than I can give you. But nonetheless, we went to Gori and Tbilisi. So this is Gori, the birthplace of Stalin, and the only place in the world where I think he's still celebrated as a great and lovely man, which of course he wasn't. He was great, but not lovely. And this was his railway carriage, which he traveled in from Moscow to Potsdam in 1945 for the post-war conference at the end of the Second World War. It's an air-conditioned, it says, security, bulletproof coach, which is parked outside the Stalin Museum. Also outside the Stalin Museum is the reconstructed house where the young Stalin lived up until the age of 16. And that's Edith on the right there in Stalin's house. And there he is outside the museum. The museum is rather a sort of fusty place with it's written in Russian and Georgian, some things in English, mostly fairly, praising him, of course, but, there's quite a lot of stuff inside, including a lot of presents he got from all kinds of people who, when he was head of state. In the city square, there's also a statue of him. And it's a fairly sleepy, it's not a city really, it's a town, it's not very large. And I don't think they get many visitors in spite of Stalin. Then from Tbilisi, we got a bus from Gori, we got a bus on to Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. And this is just a scene. Tbilisi is rather an attractive city. It's in this deep valley with the river going through it, with the fortress, as you can see in the picture in the background. And a lot of churches and old buildings. It suffered from earthquakes more than once, I think, and there was one not long before 2008, which is the year we went there. And you could see some buildings cracked and damage done. These are the bells outside the church of Meteki, the Meteki church, which is one of the ancient churches there. Tbilisi was founded in the 5th century AD. And the story was that the king was hunting for either for deer or for pheasants. And he fell into a sulfur spring. The word Tibli means warm, apparently. So Tbilisi, it's named after the warm springs, and they're still there, the sulfur springs. Whether he was catching a pheasant or a deer is not known. So that's another scene with a bit of the wall and typical Georgian church. And there's another typical Georgian church. There's a lot of church construction going on. There's a new cathedral had been built, which comes up in the next slide, I think. No, it doesn't. That's the sulfur springs. Actually, that's the roof of the sulfur springs, which I think people still go and whatever you do in a spa. Then on the slope outside Georgia, outside Tbilisi, there's the statue of Mother Georgia, who has a sword and a bottle of wine. Georgia produces very wonderful wine, which is most popular all over Russia particularly. So she has a sword and a bowl of wine. Oddly enough, Armenia has a Mother Armenia, similar sort of a personage. It must be a tradition in that area. So this is in the old town, and this is part of the earthquake damage you can see on the right there. But it's quite a pleasant old town. There are churches and old houses along by the river. There's even a metro system. Well, there's a line anyway. It's just one line. And I come back to Tbilisi because on the way back we travel through Tbilisi again, coming back from Armenia into Turkey. So these aren't the last pictures of Tbilisi, but this was after a couple of days there. We found a small little hotel, quite cheap and quite nice in a modern part of the city, really. And we went back there the second time as well. So we then moved on in a bus to Armenia, to the city of Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. And the next picture shows us stopping on the road beside the river. There's Edith and some Armenians who were having lunch with us at some roadside cafe where the bus stopped for refreshments. I can't remember how many hours that the bus took. It was quite a long journey. It probably took about 8 hours, I think. So most of the time on this visit we spent in Armenia. As I say, we were at a seminar which I was involved in. Simona on the left there was my successor. I had been at one point director of the coordinating committee for international voluntary service, and she was it by this time. And the other two guys, I think, are Armenian participants, looking happy. Simona is still working in the field. She works for the United Nations volunteers in Bonn, in Germany. We stayed in this hotel where that last picture was outside the hotel, a fairly boring place, and we spent most of the time in the seminar. So we didn't see that much of the city of Yerevan, but there's a few slides to show what we did see. This is the most famous Armenian. I should say that Armenia was established as a country by the 6th century BC and was in fact the first country in the world to declare itself as a Christian country. Georgia was the second, by the way. They were both very early, totally Christianized countries. And this gentleman is called Mesrop Mashtot, and he invented the Armenian alphabet, which is not like any other alphabet. And it has 36 letters, some of which are numbers. But it was used, and Armenians became very good, or are still, I think, very good at business. And the Armenian alphabet was much easier for calculating than Roman numbers. As you know, Roman numbers with X's and L's and things must be a nightmare for doing mathematics. Apparently the Armenian numbers made it much simpler. Anyway, this man is greatly revered in Armenia, and you find there's even a museum of language, really, of the Armenian language. And the Armenian people, I mean, the area of present-day Armenia is very small compared with the area that was inhabited by Armenians historically. Most of what is now Turkey, the eastern part of Anatolia, Turkey, was inhabited by not a majority of Armenians, but a strong mixture of Armenians and others. And they also there was a diaspora also into Persia, what is now Iran. And they were a very large population. And eventually, as you probably have heard, there was a genocide against them in Turkey. First of all, under the Sultan Abdul Hamid in 1896, because they were persecuted a bit like the way the Jews were. They were very good at business, they were very pushy, they were very successful, and they were resented by the Turkish population. So that first genocide was, well, it's an attempted genocide, it wasn't so successful. The second genocide was during the First World War, when Turkey was involved on the German side, and when 1.5 million Armenians died during and after the First World War, between 1915 and 1923. So that there are practically no Armenians left in Turkey. I think there's a few in Istanbul. So they're concentrated in this small country of Armenia. And of course, in a worldwide diaspora, there are probably almost as many in the United States. I know in Glendale, California, where my brother lived, and his house, in fact, was bought by Armenians. They're the main population of that part of Los Angeles. And of course, they exist in the diaspora I think the figures are there's 3.5 million of them in Armenia and 10 million abroad. Many also in Lebanon and other countries all around the world. We loved this fat cat. I'm not quite sure his significance, but he was on the side of the cascade, which I'll show you in a moment. Well, we just thought it was rather nice, but I really don't know. He must have some significance, which I don't know about. And this is the cascade. The cat is at the bottom somewhere. And they built this cascade to mark the 50th anniversary, because after the genocide, to go back to the history, the small Armenia that was left was independent for a year or two and then became part of the Soviet Union. It became a socialist Soviet republic from 1921, yeah, from 1921 to 1991, you know, when the Soviet Union broke up. It was part of the Soviet Union, and this cascade is a kind of monument to mark 50 years of being part of the Soviet Union. So after 1991, it fell a bit into disrepair, but it's been smartened up, and there's a couple more pictures of it coming up. Fat cat again. Going back 2 slides ago, when you saw Nash Tots, the man who invented the alphabet, I did say there was a manuscript museum, which is very fascinating, showing how the alphabet developed and so on, which we went to. Then we managed to go on a trip outside of Yerevan into the country to, there are a lot of monasteries and churches and things in this area. And the last picture you saw is the scenery around Geghard Monastery. And this is inside one of the monasteries. This is looking up at the roof. Very interesting old buildings dating from, I'm not quite sure when, very early Christian times in Armenia. This is a detail outside one of the monastery. And they have a particularly interesting type of sculpture in Armenia. It's called a kashkar. And as you can see, it's the sign of the cross, but they're a special kind of style of cross, and you find them outside some of the churches. This one's actually not at Gerhard Monastery. This is at the cathedral in Eshmiadzin, which we go to later. Still at Geghard, the monasteries are dug as caves into the rock. Very lovely. You can see several kashkars on the side there, side of the rock. And that's the outside view of the monastery. Just near the monastery, before getting there actually, is this fantastic little temple, which was built, it was Roman times. The Romans never ruled Armenia, but the temple was, in fact, a temple to Roman gods when it was first built, called the Garni Temple. In fact, it was built in the 1st century AD, I think probably before Armenia was organized as a country. And it was kind of a summer house, used as a summer house later on for the king of Armenia. And once the country became Christian, yeah, that's when they used it as a summer house rather than for worship. Also, in the same spot, there was a Roman bathhouse and some mosaics. So this is the only sort of Roman era monument in Armenia. It's rather strange because it wasn't within the Roman Empire. This is another kashkar, which was outside a church in the capital in Yerevan. It's rather a lovely one. It's quite see how old it is. And you can see at the bottom what the Armenian writing more or less looks like. I have no idea what it says. And in Yerevan also this little church. So Yerevan's a new capital which was built when Armenia was set up in the Soviet time, but it had previously been a small town, I think, but not the capital. So it was developed as a capital. It's quite a pleasant place. It's not historically fascinating, but it has a sort of grid system of streets and a very nice central square, which will come up in a moment. But first of all, here's the metro. Again, I think there's just one line, Soviet-style metro, quite efficient. And there are quite good bus services and everything else like that. And the center of the city, this very fine square built in the 1920s called Republic Square. It was formerly called Lenin Square, surprisingly enough, but it's now Republic Square. The next few pictures are of the sort of Vatican City of Armenia, or you could call it the Canterbury of Armenia, where the national cathedral and a lot of churches there. This is a place called Eshmiadzin, and this is, I think the word the name of the city is something to do with the Son of God. Anyway, these pictures are in the church of St. Hypsime, and she's quite an interesting saint. She was a nun who simply refused to marry the king. The king wanted to marry her very much, as you might imagine, and she absolutely refused and was eventually stoned to death. So she is one of the saints who is greatly honored in Armenia. This church was built in apparently the year 618. It's the same church. The Armenian church is not quite the same as the Orthodox Church. It's called the Armenian Apostolic Church, and it's a monophysite church that they believe in that Jesus is divine and human at the same time. It doesn't. They don't agree with the Greek or Russian Orthodox Church on some of these issues. This is the seminary. Just a minute. This is the seminary, I think, still in Exmiadzin. And the next few pictures are the cathedral. So outside that's the seminary. Yes, these are buildings around the cathedral. The cathedral, the other great saint who's honored in Armenia is Gregory the Illuminator. The illumination he's responsible for was a beam of light fell onto the earth, pinpointed where, I suppose, where they were to build the cathedral. Anyway, he shone a light on the earth. Now, as you probably also remember that Mount Ararat was where Noah's Ark and was in Armenia. It's now we'll see it in a minute, it's across the border. But in this cathedral, there is, apart from various bits of saints and so on, and the lance which went into Jesus on the cross, is a bit of Noah's Ark. That's the cathedral coming up the road, so it's very impressive. There it is from the other side. This is a memorial for the genocide, to remember the genocide, which was put up obviously in the Soviet period, just outside the cathedral. And that is the Kashgar, which is also in the cathedral grounds. That's another lovely one. They're very beautiful. And that's the interior. Now, there was another cathedral, which was of a slightly later, it dates from 641, which totally collapsed in an earthquake in the year 930, a place called Svatnots, which is, it's not very far from Yerevan. They're about, this is about 10 miles out, and the cathedral town is probably about 25 miles. So we visited this, the remains of this cathedral at Svatnots. That's all that's left of it, but it's preserved as I think a UNESCO heritage site. This was the view, one of the participants in our seminar, Stepan, took us to his place. And this is where he lives, in a little valley on the edge of the town. And in the garden was a huge crop of apricots, which is the great crop during the season. This was as you can see, the 12th of July. So that's the apricot season, and it is one of the main things, and there are lovely apricots everywhere. Not sure what else they produce in much abundance. They have very nice brandy, actually, sort of cognac. And I suppose quite a lot of other fruit. Then we left Yerevan and took a train, there it is, back into Georgia, to Tbilisi. Soviet type period railway station, I think, and Soviet type locomotive as well, I think. I'm not sure about Russian locomotives, but it looks to me as if it is. It was, you know, quite a comfortable train, you know, fairly basic, comfortable train. I think there was a buffet car of some kind. This is a decoration on the station. And as we went along the line, there were storks nesting, as you can see, on one of the posts, electric posts. Well, I think it was, I think we did it within the day, but it wasn't very fast. Now we're back in Tbilisi, back in Georgia. This is the new cathedral. Which is very splendid, with a big garden around it. And while we were there, there was a wedding going on. So they were all dressed up for that, taking photographs in traditional style. And you can see in the background the Georgian flag, which of course St. George's cross, like England. The flag is very like the flag of England, except it's got these coats of arms in the four corners. This is a very old church in the center of Tbilisi called the Anchiskati Church. I can't remember exactly what century, but it's pretty early in the first millennium. There it is from the outside. And the building you can see in the distance, I think, is the Parliament building, which will be across on the other side of the river. Then this is another cathedral, Sioni Cathedral, in the center of Tbilisi. See, the style of architecture is very similar to that in Armenia. The two cultures are quite close. The language, I'm not sure how different it is spoken, but the written language is different. I mean, they have an alphabet, I think, which possibly Mr. Mashtot also is responsible for, or at least is influenced by. It looks a bit like Armenian, but not the same at all. And so two very distinct alphabets and languages. Older people in these countries speak quite good Russian because it was part of the Soviet Union. Younger people tend to learn English, and they're quite good at it, actually. That is the bishop's house outside the Sioni Cathedral. And that's a view from the center of town up to the citadel. Very well defended site. Yeah. Yes, those are some rather nice old houses along the valley. And that is, in fact, the last picture of Georgia. But we took a train from Tbilisi back to Batumi. And the Georgian train was very good, actually, very modern and comfortable, quite fast. It went back through Gori, of course, which we'd come through on the way. And we spent a night in Batumi. I didn't take any photos of Batumi, but it's pleasant enough. It's a seaside town and port on the Black Sea. It's quite hot hot weather, well, it was July, and I suppose it's usually hot in that time of the year.
Mm.
And yeah, we just wandered around in Batumi, and the next morning we took a bus to the frontier of Turkey. So we'll have a pause now, I think. So where I left you, we were in Batumi on the coast of the Black Sea, still inside Georgia. And from there we crossed into Turkey. It's a very, very busy frontier post crossing point at the moment, because it's the main route between Turkey and Russia, for example. You can go through Georgia to Russia if they allow you. And also to Azerbaijan and Armenia. Turkey and Armenia are not on speaking terms because of the genocide, but you have to go through Georgia, although they have a long common frontier. But Turkey and Azerbaijan are good friends, being ethnically linked. So that frontier was a long, long queues of lorries going both ways. Anyway, somehow we got across to the frontier to a rather boring little town on the Turkish side of the Black Sea, waiting for a bus to get to Kars in the eastern end of Turkey. The main part of Turkey, as you probably know, is called Anatolia, the Asiatic end of Turkey. This is a very dramatic and long bus ride past this dam. This is a dam that's called the Koru Dam, which is under construction. And this river goes through these mountains. And the next slide will show you a town dramatically you see the castle there, but the town is right below. And that's the side of this steep valley. But it was a very exciting bus ride through that mountainous part of Turkey, eventually becoming a little bit less mountainous as we approached the town of Kars, where we were to spend a couple of nights. All taken from the bus window, which presumably accounts for the bad photo. Now, Kars is a small town which for many years actually was ruled by Russia. This eastern part of Turkey for a bit was under Russian rule, not Soviet rule. This was pre-revolutionary Russia. So Kars, the town, has quite a lot of rather handsome 19th century Russian type townhouses. If you, I don't know whether you heard of the famous Turkish author Orhan Pamuk, but one of his novels is called Snow, and it's a really very good novel, one of his better novels. And Snow, indeed, is a feature of this part of Turkey. It's extremely cold in the winter, and they have a lot of snow. But the main reason most people visit the town of Kars is because it is near of what was the Armenian capital called Ani, which is actually inside Turkey, to the chagrin of the Armenians, who have to see it. They can see it across the river valley. So they come in their cars and have picnics gazing at their lost capital over the border, and hating the Turks, no doubt, for that. And because Turkey doesn't love Armenians and Muslims don't especially love Christians, the ruins of Ani have not been well preserved by the Turkish Heritage Department, so that the bits of it which are Muslim are well preserved. The Christian bits have been allowed to go into greater decay. So the capital was set at this place became the capital of Armenia in 961. And well, it became the sort of center of whatever state there was by that time. In the 11th and 12th centuries, Armenia was quite strong and independent, and this was the capital. In 1319, there was a bad earthquake, which led to a lot of the destruction, which you'll see in these slides, and this place decayed. So these, you can see in the previous picture, there was a church. This is an archway and some town walls. So these are the ruins of what was the Armenian capital called Ani, which is actually inside Turkey, to the chagrin of the Armenians, who have to see it. They can see it across the river valley. So they come in their cars and have picnics gazing at their lost capital over the border and hating the Turks, no doubt, for that. And so this is the Church of the Redeemer, dating from 1034, 11th century. And there's quite a bit of it remaining, but this was the earthquake destruction. And you can see another church in the distance there, similar. It's a more recent construction, but still an Armenian type church. It's a taxi ride out of Ani. It's about 5 or 6 miles, I should think, at least, outside cars to get to Ani. And you take a taxi and he waits for you and you come back. Because it's quite a huge expanse of ruins. So we walked around and took pictures and so on. The next church, this one, is St. Gregory. Wait a minute. I think this is St. Gregory the Illuminator, the same St. Gregory we found in Armenia, of course. And this was an Orthodox church rather than an Armenian church. So this is St. Gregory. As you see, there are the remains of frescoes, but they've not been well preserved. There's the dome of the ceiling, still with some of the frescoes visible. Even better ones there. It's a shame, really, but they're better than nothing. The frescoes show the stories, if you could see them properly, show the trial of St. Gregory. I'm not sure what he was tried for, and the martyrdom of Saint Hypsino, the nun I told you who refused to marry the king. So those are the main stories depicted in the frescoes. That is the frontier. So the green bit on the right is Armenia. The bit on the left is Turkey. So you can see how it must be very tempting for the Armenians to come and look over the frontier. And down in the next side in the valley is the convent of the Virgins. There was a bridge there originally. I think you can see it in the next picture. There was at one time a bridge. Now this is all the convent of the Virgins, which is down in the valley. Yeah. No, that's the convent of the Virgins, sorry, and that's where the bridge should be. There you can see the remains of the bridge, right? I'm not sure the date of that bridge. Then this is the cathedral. And they built a replica of this on the Armenian side. Inside the cathedral. It's a very standard design, these churches. They all seem to have this dome and this sort of round apse, whatever it is, and this type of window. And that's another church of St. Gregory. It's a different church, but it's still in honor of St. Gregory the Illuminator. I'm not sure how much St. Gregory is honored outside Armenia, whether the Roman Church makes much of him or not, I don't know. Now this is a well-maintained building because it's an Islamic one, and so the Turkish authorities have maintained it very well. It's a Seljuk, the Seljuk Turks were the Turks who occupied Anatolia and Turkey prior to the Ottoman Turks, who came a bit later. So the Seljuks built this palace, which looks remarkably modern. And then these are the old walls of Ani, again with bits of churches mixed in with them. No, those are the actual walls. You can see them more clearly. It's defensive walls, though. But I don't think it was, as I say, it wasn't attacked. It was the earthquake that did for the town, and I presume the population at that point moved elsewhere. Now this is back in Kars. This church is Church of the Holy Apostles, but you can see it's in the same style. It's an Armenian built church. Not sure of its date. It's not so old as the other ones. As I said earlier, Kars was part of Russia, ruled by the Tsarist Russia regime between 1878 and 1920. I haven't got any pictures of Russian housing, but the next couple of pictures just in the same corner of Kars where there's a castle and this lovely old bridge and a hammam, a hot baths. That's what these domes are. And then these houses by the river, they may be of the Russian period, I'm not sure. Now Kars is, since the relationship between Turkey and Armenia stopped, Kars has been the terminus of the railway line. This minaret is somewhere in the town. And there is this nice locomotive, which was the locomotive used, I think, by Kemal Ataturk, the dictator of Turkey, the man who created modern Turkey in the 1920s, and that was his locomotive, apparently. And from Kars, we took a train. Very long journey it was. It started at 7 in the morning and reached Sivas, where we were getting off at around midnight. But it was a good journey right through really rather glorious scenery. And it went at a reasonable speed. That's the sort of scenery it went through. But by the time we got to Sivas, as you can imagine, we were fairly exhausted. I think we must have already found a hotel. So we got a taxi to a hotel. And Sivas is quite an important town in the center of Anatolia. It dates from the 11th century. It was the capital of the Sultanate of Rum, R-U-M. But like all these places in this part of Turkey, there had been settlements by the Hittites way back in BC, way back in 2000 to 1000 BC. So there are Hittite remains in a lot of these places. But what is interesting in Sivas, it's a fairly ordinary town, but it's got some very splendid Seljuk buildings. This is the one palace. There's Edith, her stick. The next slide is a hammam in Sivas, hot baths. Next one is a mosque. It's the oldest mosque in Sivas. No, this is a shrine, sorry. this isn't the mosque, this is the shrine. I'm not sure of the date of that. The Seljuks were ruling here until from 1071 to 1271, about 200 years, and after that was the Ottomans. And of course, it had been part of the Byzantine Empire before the Turks got there. But as far as I can see, there's no relic of the Byzantines, not at least in Sivas. This is the minaret of the Ulu Jami. That's the oldest mosque in Sivas, dating from end of the 12th century, actually. You can see the sort of modern town on the left. Then the next two are of a madrasa, a religious school, the Gok Madrasa. Really fine building with a very beautiful gateway. It was being renovated. As you see, there's a fence around it at the time. Two minarets. And that is the high school. Turkish modern, well, I presume from about the 1920s or 30s. It may have been even earlier. That's a better picture of the madrasa, the entrance of the madrasa. Very fine building. And these buildings are all bunched together right in the center of town, so it was quite good to see them. From Sivas, we took a bus. The train was too slow or the wrong time. We could have taken a train. So we took a bus to a very beautiful little town called Amasya, which is halfway between Sivas, which is in the center of Anatolia, and the Black Sea coast. It's halfway up, and it's a very lovely town. There's this Seljuk mosque there. Next picture is a Roman tomb. So this was part of the Empire. That's a Roman tomb. You can see the steep side of the valley. The town is in a deep valley. And that is the Sulaiman Aga Jami Mosque, dating from 1489, so the Ottoman mosque, typical Ottoman minaret. And there's another nice mosque with a twisted minaret. It's called the Twisted Minaret Mosque. I'm sure it's got another name in Turkish, dating from the 13th century. And that is a view over the town. Where old men sit and watch. You can see that you see it's a valley, there's a very steep side there, and these rather lovely old houses from the Ottoman period on the other side, when we stayed in one of those. This is an old Mongol, apparently the Mongols were here at one point, asylum, which has now become a music academy, a music school. You can see the tables and stuff here. And Amasya was I think the capital at one time of the kingdom of Pontus about the Roman period, and the kings of Pontus were buried in caves in the side of the valley there, as you can see. 300 BC, those date from. We didn't go into the caves. You can, I believe, if you climb up. We didn't. And there's a nice train going by on the way from Sivas to the coast. So these houses in the valley below and the caves above, really beautiful place. That's Edith and the young man who was serving us, and I think this is where we stayed, in one of those old houses. From Amasya, we took a bus direct to Ankara, the capital of Turkey, which is a huge modern city with some quite interesting things in it, particularly this fantastic museum called the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations. It's really beautiful. And of course, this is the Hittites and the Romans and the Seljuks and the Ottomans, the whole history is displayed inside. And of course, various sculptures outside. Then the old citadel, Ankara was just an important town, but not the capital until the time of Ataturk in the 1920s. Istanbul is where the Sultan was based. But Ataturk made Ankara the capital. And he didn't like Istanbul, really. It was too religious for him. He was really an atheist. And he set up this capital. He made the Turkey into a secular state, or tried. He's failed now, as you can imagine. The Muslims are back in control. So the citadel of the old city is called the Hisar. That's the gate into it. It's very impressive. That is Byzantine. That comes from the Byzantine Empire, which was before the Ottomans took over. In fact, they were fighting between the two of them for quite a long time. That's the view from the Hisar over the city, part of the walls of the fort there. And that is just inside it. I think we found a nice little restaurant inside it somewhere, some cafe or something. And great contrast, this is the mausoleum of Ataturk. It's a very hot day, actually. And, well, it's impressive. He was a dictator, but relatively enlightened dictator as they go. He was responsible for the reform of the alphabet, and Turkey moved over from using Arabic script to using Roman script in a Turkish version, and all sorts of things. He was a heavy drinker. He drank a lot of raka, that's more or less ouzo, which is the Turkish national. This is a photo for John Lascelles. Hope you're there, with a nice tram in Ankara. So after maybe 2 nights in Ankara, we took an overnight train. There wasn't a day train available. Took an overnight train back to Istanbul. Had a couple of days there. We booked to fly back from the new airport, which is on the Asian side of Istanbul. So we stayed on that side, but we went into the city, central city, and that's, of course, is the Bosphorus, the ferry going across, one of the beautiful mosques. It's not the Blue Mosque. I'm not sure what mosque that is. And there's the train ferry. There is a tunnel now. They've built a railway tunnel under the Bosporus, and of course there's a couple of road bridges now. But at that time, the railway carriages were shipped across as a train ferry. And the old terminal station, which took the trains, the old Berlin-Baghdad railway station, was that this is the terminus of the railway going east to Baghdad and to Basra, right across, including the one we took to Sivas and Kars. And we stayed, this is where we stayed quite in the little sort of suburban town on that Asian side of Istanbul, very charming place on the seaside, Sea of Marmara. That's the view in the same place. called Buyukada. That's it. I think we must have gone out for a boat trip and took a picture of that. That's the ferry berth, where on the Haida Pasha side that's the Asian terminal of the ferry boat, just next to the station. The station's behind on the right. And then in the center of Istanbul, there's this funicular little train that goes up to Taksim Square, which is the central square of Istanbul, where there was, if you remember, a rebellion a couple of years ago against the present government, which got crushed quite well. And finally, last picture, I think, that's the Topkapi Palace, Sultan's Palace, seen from the ferry. So that's the old original, Sultan's zone in Istanbul, with the walls around, and then you find the Santa Sophia Mosque, was a church, and the Blue Mosque just behind them. So from Istanbul, we just flew back to UK.
Thanks, Nigel. Thank you.